Welcome to the Insight Research Podcast, where we explore the journeys and motivations of clinical academics, researchers, and healthcare professionals shaping the future of healthcare and science. My name is Firdaus Omar, student occupational therapist from London South Bank University. In today's episode, we're delving into the exciting world of clinical research. What does it mean to be a clinical academic or a clinical researcher? And how do they bridge the gap between research and practice? What inspires them to take on this unique role? Joining us today is...
Good afternoon. My name is Yaskey. I'm a senior lecturer at London South Bank University and also a clinical practitioner within the social work field.
Nice to meet you. And we also have...
Hello, my name's Olivia. I am the technician for the Motor Learning Lab here at RNOH in the outpatients department, and I am a PhD student at Brunel University.
Nice to meet you too. So for our listeners who might be new to this, how would you define a clinical academic or a clinical researcher? Because when I was first researching into it, there were so many overlaps, so it would be good for our listeners to know.
I think from my perspective, being a clinical researcher, it really focuses on bringing to life questions that you may have come across within practice and then pursuing that evidence base in terms of the research framework to help you deep dive slightly more into a question that might be out there in terms of the area of expertise that you are within. That would be my brief synopsis of it.
That sounds interesting. What about you, Olivia?
Yeah, I like to think of a clinical researcher as anybody working within a clinical role that is contributing to solving of problems and progression of a clinical practice. So they might be a technician who is helping collect data, they might be a team lead who is supporting students doing research from universities. Quite broad in my opinion. I think the job title always tends to, well, the job description I should say, always tends to vary depending on the place it's set in. Yeah,
I agree. And what does a typical day look like for you?
Oh, that can vary. I think from a clinical perspective, it may be that I'm pursuing a question. In the past, I've done some research with another university, with a group of other academics, where we were working with a local authority and their youth offending team, and they had noticed that there were high numbers or inconsistencies in the outcomes for different service user groups. So that led to a question, and for one particular part of that process to deep dive, as I mentioned earlier, it may have involved me meeting with some of the practitioners. It may have also involved me looking at some of the data, real life data, in terms of the impacts and the outcomes for some of the service users or people with lived experiences who we are focusing on. So it just depends. Right. So there will be some interaction with the individuals, professionals and service users, but also the data, because the data is also key as well.
And what's the work-life balance for you? What would you say?
I think that can be a challenge because part of my role is still transitioning from practice, but also teaching.
Right.
So again, that can be demanding in terms of preparation, ensuring that you have material that's accessible to the students that you are supporting. But also as well, I think the engagement from the students helps to energize me as well in terms of their ideas, their questions. But it's a balance. Right. I think it's about being kind to myself. I say that to my students, so I have to practice that as well.
Absolutely.
So, yes.
That's really good advice for students. Very kind.
Yes.
To a group that can be really stressed.
Of course.
So it's really nice to hear there's such a supportive nature.
Yes. And modelling good practice as well.
Yeah.
So maybe even some of the concepts that I've been undertaking in the field in terms of the clinical aspect, I'm bringing that into my teaching, which can then bring to life some concepts where students are looking at a situation that's really abstract. And then if I'm then talking about I'm involved with some research with other academic colleagues, that can bring it alive and might help them pursue that line of curiosity.
Definitely. What about you, Olivia?
Oh, my day-to-day's changeable at the moment. So I am in a full-time PhD, but I live in London and I have to involve some of my clinical work around that. And so they were very kind to let me keep 2 days here.
Oh,
so
that's
I
good.
was full-time here for the last over 7 years now. And then I've kept 2 of my days here. So I do Tuesdays and Thursdays at the Motor Learning Lab up in Therapies. And then the rest of my week is PhD work. And that varies quite a lot at the moment, the PhD work. I'm juggling, as all PhD students do, different projects at different time points on their journey. So I've got a systematic review in early stages, still doing full text screening for that. So that can be quite a nice day because actually it's quite sitting and relaxed. I can maybe do it in a coffee shop. I can maybe go and do it somewhere else.
Okay.
And then the other project that I'm doing, I've just finished a data collection project in a lab-based setting where I've had 41 older adults come in and they've done lovely data collection on their adaptive gait, so walking in kind of complex routes and how they behave in complex walking. And so that, while I was doing that data collection, that was a very busy day today because I was organising participants and I was telling them what time they need to be there and really kind of helping fill my week with lots of data collection to make sure I got lots done. But now that's all collected, so I've moved past that stage and I'm processing the data, which again is more static. I can take my coffee and I can sit and do it at my own time. And so at the moment, my day-to-day is fairly good. It's not too bad. I kind of spend 1 day on review, 1 day on data, and then whatever's left over at the end of the week gets smushed into a Friday. And then, as I said, my Tuesday and Thursday I'm here, and my day-to-day here now is really joyful because it's quite patient-centred in that I'm not doing quite so much of the kind of the extra bits you pick up. I'm kind of coming in on my Tuesday and I'm setting up the lab, I'm seeing a couple of patients, processing their data and heading home, whereas before I was kind of doing lots of little extra bits in between, which happens when you work in a role for a long amount of time. You pick up extra jobs here and there. I do really enjoy coming in on Tuesday and Thursday and still seeing patients and seeing humans, because when you do a PhD, it's very easy to kind of stay at a computer and get a bit isolated and only have yourself for company. So those 2 days coming here are precious.
And just out of curiosity, what exactly is it motor learning lab technician?
So my job in the motor learning lab as a technician is to set it up in the morning. So the lab itself is essentially a big treadmill in front of a huge screen. So it's a 180-degree screen curved around the front of a big treadmill that goes side to side a little bit and it goes up and down a little bit. And it's got, for our services, it's got 2 main kind of uses. One is for gait analysis and one is for gait rehab. So in the mornings we do gait analysis and we stick loads of the little reflective markers. If you've ever seen how they make motion capture in films where they put markers on actor spaces and they make them move avatar and things like that. So it's the same technology. We stick it on a patient and we get a biomechanical model of them as they walk on the treadmill. So that's a gait analysis. And then in the afternoons I will operate the treadmill for rehab sessions. So physio will bring their patient in and they will have a patient who's had any variation of the kind of the surgical treatment that we have here. And they get to do uphill walking, downhill walking. They get to do kind of semi-immersive, augmented reality. There are loads of different words for kind of using the interaction that we get from the screen and the treadmill's movements to simulate, I suppose, outdoor walking, and then they get to dodge seagulls and walk across rope bridges.
That sounds really interesting.
So it's really fun. As a technician, I get to do quite kind of data collection stuff in the mornings for gait analysis, and then in the afternoon I get to help facilitate the rehab sessions, which are always a bit different and always a bit fun.
Oh, that sounds great. And how do you think, so I'm going to go back to Ken, how do you think your role contributes to improving patient care or advancing healthcare practice?
I think it plays a huge role because it's about improving outcomes for families, adults, vulnerable people. And I think having an evidence base and exploring some of those questions that are out there in terms of disparities, inequalities, a gap within a service, asking and exploring a research question is a key component, because I think that can then bring about new evidence, new learning, and it can also help students in terms of, you mentioned a moment ago in your answer around systematic reviews, research questions, even at dissertation level, students can start that process and then that can be built upon. Equally as well, research is not static. It's very fast moving, and new information, new technology, new demographics all shape our research. So I think it's important for us not to be static. Even an academic such as we have to keep ourselves vigilant and also as well immersive in terms of what are some of those main questions. Equally as well, passion plays a key part. If it's a key question that you're passionate about, you'll be even more motivated. Yeah. But as I said in one of my earlier answers, students can ask a question that can then prick my conscience to say, well, actually, that's a key question, and I can either ask the student for them to pursue that further, or it may be a broader point in terms of this might be a question that might need to be pursued further.
Right, definitely.
So, yes.
And Olivia, you were saying you focus on patients' gaits and rehabilitation. So in that circumstance, like how do you think you're improving patient care for your patients?
Oh, it's quite hard to capture, actually. It's something that is a kind of a little slow growing piece of research that is hoping to come out of the lab in the next few years, is actually capturing exactly that question and why and how we improve the patient's experience, because we get such lovely verbal kind of thank yous and they love the experience. It's obviously quite a different rehab approach to the usual outpatient or inpatient setting. So over the last few years, we've always gone, why aren't we recording this? Somebody needs to measure this information. And so I can't give you the perfect answer because we are collecting that data, but just from experience, I think one of the things that is almost one of the hardest things to capture is that the treadmill that we work on in the environment that is presented is a real confidence building environment for patients who have had such a change in their life, and they have had to relearn gait for whatever reason. And they have gone through varying kind of walking aids, or orthotics, and all of these things that feed into their rehab journey. And we in the lab get to put all of those things together and then take them away sometimes. So if someone comes in early stages on 2 crutches and they're not potentially using those crutches for pain, they're using them for confidence and a little bit of balance, and we kind of say, you've got handrails on the treadmill, but you let go of the right ones. You see how it feels. And we measure their improvement in speeds and their scores on the apps and things like that, but I think one of the big things that we kind of get to see, and it's obvious, is reduction in kind of caution and fear, and that an easy way of seeing that is reduction in walking aids. So it's always a really nice like a little pat on the back when you've seen them for whatever length of time and they've come in on 2 crutches and they leave on none or a stick, and you think, they feel good, they feel happy that they can go out and they can navigate hills and changes in pathways and stuff like that. So yeah.
As a student occupational therapist, that's enlightening to hear, because it's great to focus on not only patients' outcome long term, but also their self-esteem and confidence. So thank you for that. That's really interesting. So moving on to the next question, we're going to focus on early inspiration. Can you share what first sparked your interest in clinical research? Was there a moment or experience that kind of led you to your career? Start with Ken.
That's a really interesting question. I think I'd have to go back to thinking about my time as a student.
Right.
And there was one particular lecturer that talked about, I was studying sociology at the time, and he focused on criminology, or he talked about the criminal justice system, and he also talked about some of the rates in terms of females being incarcerated, certain males being incarcerated, and that led me to think about my environment in terms of peers who may have gone down a different route negatively, but trying to turn their lives around. And I think that sparked my interest in terms of what are other writers saying about these real life issues, and that sparked my interest to pursue further study, further reading, and even now in terms of delivering information to students in terms of contemporary challenges that we face within society, within a social work context, such as child protection concerns, safeguarding issues, vulnerability around adults, homelessness. So I think a lecturer sparked my interest. At that time, I didn't envisage that I would be a lecturer. But again, it's about that seed of knowledge and then pursuing it a little further.
That's really inspiring. Thank you. What about you, Olivia?
Yeah, it's a tricky one for me. I think I've always had a problem-solving nature, which is probably quite an underpinning of research. You know, you have a question and you want to find out the answers why. And then I did a postgrad, and then I got this job that I have now at RNOH, and it felt like a jackpot, because I was like, God, this is great, this is so cool. That is the only way I could just remember describing it, thinking there's nowhere else like this, and there's so much potential in a new environment, especially one in the NHS that doesn't exist anywhere else in the NHS, right? So you think, well, if there's problems to be solved, this is the place to do it, because actually no one else has even got the chance. They haven't got the equipment that we've got. So great, now this is a nice place to start off, right? If there's problems, I'm here, I'm helpful, I can be helpful, right? And then I got familiar with the lab and the tech and kind of setting it up, and I was always talking to my colleagues, Matt and Rasheen. We're quite a small team, there's only 3 of us, and we're always saying, oh, it'd be a great idea to do this, but we are a small team, and you have idea after idea, and you don't get a chance for these things to grow because you're too busy doing your 9 to 5, right? And then the internships that Brunel partners with RNOH to provide are research internships, and that came up, and I thought, I'm going to go for that because it'll give me the time and it'll give me the space to really think about these problems and pick one and make a start. So I think the opportunity of the internship for me was where I thought I can actually turn my curiosity and my problem solving nature into research. So I think that was probably the starting point for me. So much later than you know.
Okay.
I think although we go through our undergrads or our apprenticeships, whatever it is, you as people, we kind of have underlying parts of us that make us we just want to know the answer why to things. And I think as people, we kind of find a way to make that part of us useful, and I think that's what I try to do.
Thank you. As a student, that's comforting to hear as well. Like, you don't always need to make your decisions straight away. Sometimes it will just come to you. That's great. And also, in your research career, are there any facilitators that you came across, support for our listeners, if you could share?
I think for myself, practitioners who were passionate about understanding a question. So I think it's from a leadership standpoint, because I've done some research with a couple of local authorities, and the leadership in terms of a team manager or a person who manages a group of social workers or other health professionals, they've had a passion and a curiosity to establish the why, understanding the why in terms of what's going on in terms of a question. And building on what you've mentioned about curiosity, that curiosity has then sparked for them to liaise with academics to try and then pursue this question. So I can't really name one person, but I'd say a number of practitioners who are qualified in the field, but their passions have continued in terms of understanding the question or trying to answer that question. So I think practitioners, once they've graduated, that understanding that and that knowledge is continuous. Within social work, we have a concept of continuing professional development. And I think that is something that's relevant to research as well. And I think that can be ongoing and it can be collaborative.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think for me, it's not necessarily one individual, although there are certainly individuals within RNOH and therapies particularly who create such a culture of support around wanting to engage in research at any level, and whether that's actually taking a project on yourself or just contributing in some way. And the clinical staff within therapies here at RNOH are such great facilitators for giving you the confidence to come to them with perhaps an idea and say, how on earth do I go about this? And I mean, there's a real support system within RNOH, particularly in therapies, for allowing us as clinicians and assistants to get involved in any way or form. So there's people like Roxy Tarani, who works within therapies, and she facilitated the internships with Brunel. So for me, that was huge, because I was able to do that internship and then have a connection with Brunel, and that gave me such a confidence and a platform to go for my PhD studentship that otherwise I wouldn't necessarily have had the confidence to do. So I think it's the existing culture within our department that is kind of held up by everyone who was already involved in research at loads of different levels, and there's loads of examples of how they're involved in research, and it just kind of showcases that you don't necessarily have to have one huge big project running to be a researcher. You can contribute in very small ways here and there to start your journey.
And would you say during like your PhD journey, Brunel was like your mentorship during your research career? That makes sense.
I think what I get from Brunel, my supervisor there, Elmar, is to really turn the practical kind of side of research and data collection and all of that, and the kind of the human skills that I've learned within the trust into being a good kind of researcher in the communication it takes to involve participants and collect data, and Brunel has provided the kind of the structure of understanding how to break down research into something that's kind of more academic, something that fits the recognised structure of research, because I needed that. I needed to form more kind of structural and, work on my writing styles and things like that, and my data analysis techniques and all those things that terrify young researchers, because it sounds quite serious, and Brunel has allowed me to learn all the little things I need to make it all kind of fit together quite nicely.
That's great.
Yeah.
And speaking of university, we do have our lecturer here, Ken. So have you done any type of like mentorship or leadership for students?
Yes, I've been involved in terms of LSBU, supporting dissertation students who have been undertaking their MA systematic review. So again, it's providing them with inspiration in terms of what might appear to be a daunting piece of work, but helping them to manage their time, distill the question, because they may have a relevant topic question, but to avoid them being overwhelmed, helping them to break down the question. What are those key aspects that you're wanting to find? And then helping them navigate research.
Yeah. I think,
which is exciting.
Yeah, I think as academics you're so very good at
Yes.
kind of reining us in as young researchers
Yes.
and making us really consider what we've decided is a good idea
Yes.
and break it down and analyse, is it actually achievable? And you definitely create a safe space to have all the thoughts to make it work.
I think you can say that academics we are the supervisors for the projects, but critical friends as well. Just in terms of, this is a really good topic area, have you considered, rather than changing it lock stock, because it is the students' own initial ideas. So it's just helping them consider, reconsider.
Turn all their good intentions into something useful.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that's a main aspect, as well as taking inspiration from other academic colleagues who have published and they're still involved in more research, and I think that can give inspiration as well, not only to myself but to the students.
Thank you so much for that insight. And it's also great talking about, the strengths and the support you received, but also what are some challenges that you faced in your career?
I think doubt. I think the concept that we hear about now is imposter syndrome, that kind of approach. Am I able to deliver information to a group of students or academics? Is the question for the research actually relevant? Does it actually need to be asked and even answered? But then I think with confidence and pursuing things, that can then, from my personal perspective, it takes time, but it can then dissipate. It can be reduced. I never envisaged as a student that I would then be public speaking, which is now my main role, or one of my main roles, apart from the alongside the clinical research. So our journeys take us in different ways. So I think the challenges are there. I can't airbrush them, so to speak. They are there, but I think it's about balancing. But I think as well, on a practical footing, time. Time is another challenge. How many hours in a day? And what I mentioned earlier in terms of being kind to yourself, sometimes that has to take center stage, but sometimes there are competing priorities. So it is a challenge. It's an ongoing process.
For our listeners, I think it's important, we be kind to ourselves.
Of course.
And also, like you said, you had doubt, but then again, you were confident, and that's how you overcame that. What about you, Olivia? Would you like to share?
I think for me, a challenge is always, and probably will continue to be, pushing myself beyond what I'm comfortable doing, and I'm sure other people can agree with that. Because you grow organically with these experiences that you get along the way, and I think it's the same in any area. I don't think it's just healthcare. We learn so much day to day as we go, because you'll qualify and all of a sudden you'll start seeing patients that you've never done before, and you have to start picking out those things and holding on to them, and then all of a sudden you'll get to a place where you know so much, and you have to keep reminding yourself that actually all of the self-doubt that we always get is what's challenging. Well, for me, that's what's challenging me. So I am notorious for venting to friends and family and them saying, what are you on about? You do this already, and you're already doing a PhD in a subject that you're interested in, and you've gotten here, so all of the things you've done to get you here are evidence that you are quite capable of continuing to grow and not needing to know everything before you get there, because I don't plan to finish my PhD and embark on a job that's my career for the rest of my life. I plan to change and keep deciding what I want to do next based on my experience and what I've learned along the way. So yeah, I think my challenge is really continuing to kick myself to do things that feel horribly uncomfortable, like podcasts, and having these conversations that you've never had before, but actually you're quite capable of sharing your experience, and that will be helpful to somebody else who's having all the same thoughts.
Yeah, it will be helpful to our listeners. Thank you. And also, what steps do you think as a student should we take, or even if someone's already in practice, what steps do you think they should take so that they can become a clinical researcher or a clinical academic? Of course, everyone's journey is different.
It's very different. I think if you have got any curiosity in your subject and you think there are spaces or gaps in knowledge to be filled, and you are passionate about trying to fill those gaps, because the end goal is improved patient care in healthcare, exactly. That is what research feeds into, then keep asking those questions and trying to solve those problems. They might be tiny and you might not know how to solve them, but somebody around you or people around you, because it's not a one-person job. Definitely. Most of the time it's a village in all these research projects. I think that's what any clinical academic will tell you. It's not just you ever. There's always at least 3 of you, hopefully. So if you are graduating and you think, I've got to start moving in that journey, keep asking questions and find the people that you can have these discussions with, that can help you grow those kind of chats about whatever it is you're interested in, because they may just be chats and discussions, but they will grow and let you go and ask the next right question to the next right person, and they might just introduce you to somebody. They might say, do you know who you need to talk to? You need to go and talk to Ken. He's fun. He'll help you find the answers. So don't be afraid to ask lots of questions of lots of different people, because if you keep them all to yourself, no one's going to help you answer them.
Pursue that curiosity. I think that's a really important thing, and it's about, no question is a silly question, and it's also having conversations with your supervisor, having conversations with your lecturer, getting back in touch with your lecturer once you're in practice, and again, remaining curious.
Yeah, definitely. Have the confidence to see somebody doing what you think might be like you want to end up doing. Have the confidence to ask them for a coffee. And go, what is it about their job that I really like? Chat to them about it.
What was their pathway?
What was their pathway? What skills have they got? I think that would be really useful. If somebody had told me that, I'd be like, do you know what, you're right. And it's human interaction that helps us grow like that.
Of course.
Definitely. And also, as a student, going into the workplace, that seems like a frightening idea, like a 9 to 5. All those hours seem, tiring. So how do you manage to balance that clinical work, or should I say, your academics, so being at uni, but at the same time managing research? How does that work?
It's a constant challenge, because I think it's about trying to find spaces within your schedule to then pursue the research question or the research project. There will be some natural breaks within a schedule, and I think it's then about the determination for me to then commit. But then, as you mentioned earlier, you're not working in isolation, you're working with other members. So it might be that when your pressure points, whether it's in practice or whether it's for me in terms of teaching or marking assessments, arise, then it might be that a particular concept or part of a project I may not be able to complete at that particular time. But then there will be a window where, Ken, there's some space now. We'd like you to interview some subjects. And that was what happened 18 months ago. So where I was able to interview some young people who were known to a local authority, just to get their perspective on the services they achieved. So again, it's just finding that balance. But it's never easy, but it can be achieved.
Yeah, I agree. I think you will find what motivates you to get, you know, a system in place that works for you. And for me, I am very grateful for the structure that is given to me by the 2 days I work at RNOH, because I'm here for those 2 days. So if I don't get my PhD work done Monday, Wednesday and Friday, well, no one else is going to do it for me. So if you're a structure person, if you're a schedule person, lean into that and find time to like block out bits of things where you know you have to get done. I'm a to-do list person, like
likewise.
Notorious to-do list person. I love the feeling of ticking something off once it's finished.
A sense of fulfillment.
So good. And I think if you can kind of find a structure that works for you and keep motivating yourself to work in that structure, it's not perfect. Like I very easily will have a day where I get to midday and think, oh gosh, I've been absolutely useless, I've done nothing today. But you speak to the people around you and they've gone, oh, I didn't do anything out, I didn't do anything on Friday either. You know, we all have days where we don't get done what we think we should have got done, and that is perfectly normal. So I think around building your structure and whatever, maybe if it's a timetable or a to-do list to work to, also don't beat yourself up when you perhaps don't actually get that job done that day. And I work differently in different spaces, so I can quite happily sit and read articles in a coffee shop and make notes on them as I go along for my review. But I cannot do that at home because there is just too much distraction at home. There are so many other jobs in your life that you think you could do instead when you're at home. For me personally, other people have offices in their house and they're quite good at going in and shut the door to the office and they think I can ignore the rest of my house. I'm not like that. I can't. If I'm in the house, you know, there's always jobs to be done. So I think you have to balance your work, whatever it may be when you graduate, with your life, because you're not doing it just to work. You know, that's not why you're here to grow as a human. And so really make sure that when you are doing all of that hard work, you've got other stuff that you enjoy, because otherwise you lose the enjoyment and the passion for your job if you sacrifice your other stuff for it, right? So if you're not doing both, you start to not like the work because you think it's holding me back from doing the reading and the sport or whatever it is. So just remind yourself to hold some space in your calendar for friends and family and stuff like that, so you don't grow to be a bit miserable in your job.
Well-being is important.
It's so
it's
important.
That balance. It's a balance,
and it is doable. It is. I think I feel as though now I'm in a position where I can genuinely say it's doable. I am doing 2 roles and I am living my life at the same time. And I couldn't do both on their own and be as content as I am now.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience about your career or your experiences? I was also wondering, out of curiosity, like any research projects that you're proud of, like was a big achievement for you as well?
I think for myself it was the project that I did with another university, which was focusing on a mentoring program within the university for students from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds. And we were able to interview the students. We worked with practice educators, so these were qualified social workers that would support students whilst they are on placement. And we were then able to take our findings to something called JSWEC, which is a research project, or a research it's a research day for universities up and down the country. It's a joint research day, and we were then able to share our findings with other academics from across the country. So we created a poster with some of our findings, and then we presented those findings to a larger national audience. So that was a big accomplishment in 2023.
That sounds really good. That
Yes.
sounds really good. And do you have any like final advice for like students, our listeners?
I think pursue the dream. I think be kind to yourself and pursue that curiosity. That question that's burning away, pursue it in terms of research, or if you're seeing an inequality, social work is about social justice. So it's really about pursuing that dream. And I think, as you mentioned earlier, it takes a village. So it's about that collaboration as well. But pursue the dream and be kind to yourself.
Yeah, no,
Thank
I have
you.
to agree, definitely. Yeah.
I will definitely pursue the dream, hopefully. What about you, Olivia?
I think I'm yet to have my kind of big research finding and feeling of accomplishment in that. Maybe my PhD will be it, who knows. I'd like to hope so at this point. I think I have to say that there's one moment, and it was during so I did a little very small grant application within therapies to get some time to do a little great research question, and we did interviews to kind of pitch ourselves. Why do you want this money, and why do you want to do this research question? We did it, and then at the end of that interview, Andrew, one of our physios, said, where do you want to be in 5 years' time? And something in my brain went, I think I could do a PhD. I think, and maybe that's next. And I said it out loud. And it was one of those times where you say something out loud and you think, I've never said that out loud before. But that moment allowed me to go, it's a bit real now. You better go and get on with it.
It's an example of confidence as well.
Yeah. So I think that was a really nice moment for me, and hopefully my finding will come in a few years' time.
That sounds great, and it's a great reminder that to celebrate our achievements, whether big or small as well. And any final advice or any comments for us?
I'm with Ken. I think collaboration. Remind yourself that you have built some skills and you will have a question, and then you might get to a point on your questioning answer journey and go, I haven't got that skill. Go and find someone that does. Go and find the person that can slot into your research and help you take the next step to get it another step further or finish whatever it is. Or go and learn the skill, go and apply for a course. Keep grasping all those extra little skills that you need to finish research projects, and if that comes from somebody else, that's absolutely fine. We have to use our friends and colleagues, what they're good at. We're all good at different things, so just collaborate.
Collaboration.
Thank you so much. I feel like that's really important for us, especially for like my personal research journey as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Insight South London Research Podcast. Ensure to tune in with us for our next episode. We're going to be discussing research nurses and practitioners, so do make sure you tune in. We will understand their roles inside of delivery research team. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe. Stay tuned for more inspiring stories from healthcare and research professionals.